Hi, I'm Cheryl Texera, and I am going to talk to you today about how to prioritize your projects using the Scrum methodology because I think it is a great, simple strategy for prioritizing. The thing is that if you don't prioritize at all, you're really going to prioritize because you're going to prioritize by default. Give up, or you're going to choose maybe the easiest thing to do, or maybe you'll get stuck in the most difficult thing and end up down a rabbit hole. So, prioritizing is a really big part of your management of all of your projects all and your entire business because it actually starts from the top down. As the CEO of your business, you're going to be prioritizing what projects you're going to work on all together. And now you've decided you're going to do all these different projects this year. How do you decide which project is going to be the first project you work on, and the next project, and the next project? And it's possible you could be working on multiple projects at a time. And there's really nothing wrong with that. And I want to emphasize that because your whole entire career as a solopreneur, you're going to be juggling multiple things. You might be creating weekly content or even more than once a week. Plus, you're working on projects and working on other types of things like marketing. And you're not just focusing all of your attention on your projects. And so let's talk about the way we prioritize in Scrum. Scrum has this really elegant way of prioritizing that I absolutely love. It goes like this: must have, should have, could have, and won't have at this time. And I love that because it is so simple and it depends on what level you are at. That defines the scope of how you're going to prioritize. So if you're at that, CEO level, you're looking at your strategic plan for the year, you're thinking about all the things you need to do in order to achieve the goals that you want, you're going to prioritize those by that must have, should have, could have, and won't have at this time. And the things that you might not already have something on the won't have at this time list, but you might. So think about the iPhone. I always talk about the iPhone. Remember, they didn't have that camera. Actually, I stand corrected. They had a camera on their iPhone 1, but it wasn't a front facing camera. You couldn't flip it around. And so they had to prioritize which they wanted. Did they want to hold the phone and not release it until they figured out that technology or got that to a point where it passed the quality level that they desired? Or were they going to release the phone without it? And they went ahead and released the phone without it. And so it's really important to start looking at all of those things. What must you have? What must you have? On that iPhone, they had to be able to make calls, right? It's not a phone if it can't make and receive calls, right? And they really should have texting that they wanted to do because they were moving in to be that smartphone, and they wanted to have that virtual keyboard with easier texting so you didn't have to hit the number 1 5 times to get an A, and so on and so forth. And so they had that front facing camera, and it probably was a could have type of item for a while. And as they got closer and closer to their deadline of when they wanted to release that first phone, they decided that it wasn't ready and they weren't going to hold up the release of the iPhone 1 to wait for that. So it became a won't have at this time. By the next release, they had it, and the rest is history. If you think about your business, it's the same way with your business. That must have. What are the things that you absolutely must have? Now, you could be doing that within projects, choosing which projects you need to do first, but you can also prioritize within projects. And so let's think about that. If you have competing projects and you're trying to make some deadlines, or you have multiple projects lined up for the year, and you want to make the deadline on the first project because you need to get started on that second project or you won't make that deadline, you may need to cut some of the scope of your first project in order to make the deadline. That doesn't mean that you have to cut that feature forever. It simply means that you're going to eliminate that feature or whatever it is from the scope of your project right now. And then you'll add that at a later date, because remember that Scrum is very cyclical. Everything is built on that identifying an opportunity, coming up with a solution, building part of that solution, and then getting it out, getting your people to actually utilize it and use it and give you feedback. And so it works in a cycle. And as you go through working that one project, you're going to touch that project many times over. It's not just a one and done. We'd all love it to be, right? You make it, create it, put it out there, and then it just makes money while you sleep. The reality is you're going to have to keep improving on it over and over, if nothing else, in order to simply update it. Let's think about a course, right? If you created a course, you're going to have to go through that course every year and review it and ensure that it is up to date and that things haven't changed. Otherwise, you're going to be giving out old information for your people, and you don't want to do that. And so the things that can drive your priorities also can be things like, one is what your customers, the feedback that your customers gave you may have a different priority than you realized, and you may have just learned that. Also, your skill set can drive those priorities. If you don't have a skill set yet for whatever it is that you need to do, you may need to put that part of the project on hold until you have time to develop that skill set. Remember what we talked about with strategic learning. It's really important that you're not going down on shiny objects and just learning all these things that have nothing to do with the projects you're working on, because that makes it very difficult for you to implement those things. So make sure that the learning is related to all of your projects that you're working on now or this year, so that you can apply what you learned immediately. So that skill set can really drive that priority. Also, technology can drive your priorities. So I've been moving my whole website over to GrooveFunnels. When I purchased it over a year ago, the technology wasn't ready. They weren't there. We could have muddled through it, but it was going to be too time consuming for me to actually put that project as a priority. And so that project of moving my website over to GrooveFunnels sat on the back burner until just this year. Actually, just in the last couple of months, I've been doing it. So technology can drive your priorities. Also, your timeline can drive your priorities. So if you think about all the things that you have to do within a project, and let's say you want to get it done in 3 months, you may need to cut some items out, make them a won't have at this time in order to achieve that deadline. But more importantly, you want to make sure that you know what those must haves are, so that you get those things done first and you don't find yourself working on something that was a nice to have that you could have cut, but you spent all your time working on that and now you don't have the must haves done. The other thing that can drive your priorities is the market. If something is trending and you were working on that particular thing, and you may want to do a special push to get that thing out there so that you can be the leader in the market, rather than coming in too late because you didn't put everything else aside to get that thing done. There's ways to prioritize. First, at that project level, what projects do you need in order to achieve the goals for this year? Within those projects, what features will you have that are must haves, should haves, could haves, and won't haves? And then within those features, as you build them out, you're going to have tasks that will have to prioritize as well. Remember, your business is like an iPhone. You build one product at a time, and then you keep iterating through and improving on it, making it better, adding features. So make sure that you're thinking about prioritizing, because it's super simple to do it the Scrum way. Remember, must have, should have, could have, and won't have at this time. If you are getting overwhelmed and you have project after project and you feel buried in them, then think of it in terms of that. What's my must haves of this project? What are my should haves? What are my could haves? And label those things, and maybe even move a few things out of it. You won't believe how much more in charge you will feel of that project once you prioritize it. Because if you don't prioritize, you will anyway. Trust me, you will choose where you fail. because we can't always get everything done. My husband and I used to joke about that all the time when our bosses wouldn't tell us what the priorities were. Then we knew we were going to fail somewhere because we had too much on our plate. So we chose where we failed. It's better to prioritize, get those must haves done. Some of those should haves, hopefully, some of those could haves. And then you may have to move some of those could haves into the won't have column, but you iterate through, and next time you get that thing done. Just like that front facing camera in the iPhone 1. Remember, your business is a process, and you're going to build year after year after year. And your 10-year goal and what your business will look like in 10 years is going to look different than what it will look like today. And just like the iPhone 1, it got out there, generated much needed revenue and a fan base so that they could continue on with that project. And that's why prioritizing is important, because you can get your products out there faster than you would if you just waited until you got every single detail done.